Hello, everyone. My name is Monica Lewis. I am the engagement manager at SMU DataArts, and I use she, her pronouns. On behalf of our team at SMU DataArts, we sincerely thank each of you for joining us for today's session, Surveying Success for Inclusion, Empowering Organizations Through Workforce Demographics. Before we get started, and as folks continue to trickle in, we want to take a moment to pause to acknowledge the Indigenous people of all the lands that we call home. While we come today on a virtual platform, we take this moment to acknowledge the significance of the lands, and from coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territories of all First Nations people. At SMU Data Arts, we take this moment to honor the Apache, the Caddo, the Comanche, Cushata, Tonkawa, the Wichita, affiliated Kichi, Waco, Taiwaikoni, and Lenni Lenape peoples, upon whose traditional territories SMU Data Arts now exist. We'll share a link to a map of Indigenous communities, past and present, in our chat feature, and we invite each of you to share your own local land acknowledgement in our chat feature if you would like to. Before we start today's session, I do want to start with a bit of housekeeping. First, today's session is designed for a bit of engagement, so I hope you feel comfortable utilizing some of the features that I'm going to pinpoint for you. I do preface that we are recording our presentation today, and that will be available to you. We'll share a recording via our follow-up email, and you're able to share that recording with anyone who was not able to join us today. Now, there are a few ways to engage with us. The first option you'll see is our Zoom dashboard. You'll find that Q&A feature. If you have any questions about any of the content that we cover today, feel free to drop a question for our team. Someone in the background will be happy to assist you. We also have the chat feature available today. If you have any questions or if you would like to communicate to our team and respond to a couple of our prompts, we hope that you use that chat feature to share your thoughts and perspectives for a full and robust session today. We have closed captioning available. You'll find the CC icon on your Zoom dashboard, and that will help you activate the closed captioning feature. You're able to see subtitles, a subtitles tab where you can make adjustments as you need to. If you have questions about this feature or any of the features that I've just mentioned, feel free to shoot us a chat question and we'll be happy to assist you. And again, we are recording today's session, and so we do hope that you are able to engage with us. With that, here is our agenda for today's session. First, we're going to explore the latest insights and findings from reports from SMU DataArts and our collaborating partners that examined workforce demographics across the country. We'll spend some time learning and hearing from two amazing guests as they shared their experience with individual and regional workforce demographics. And by the end of our time together, I'll share a little bit about how you can take our workforce demographics tool to your organization to continue to learn insights about your own workforce. Now, I am doing a lot of chatting, and I hope that you feel comfortable using that chat feature. Before we start, I always like to know who's in this virtual space with us. So if you could, in that chat feature, feel free to introduce yourself. You can share your name, pronouns, your title, and also a response to the prompt that you see on your screen. We're pretty curious about your experience with workforce demographics. So if you could share, does your organization currently collect demographic data? And if they do, how are you utilizing this information? If not, how would you like to use that type of information? And I'll preface, there is no right or wrong answer. Feel free to share. This is a learning space, and it's always great to learn from other peers in our room space. I'll share as you are sharing with the audience. Be sure to use that drop-down feature to encourage that you're talking to everyone and not just the host and panelists. But we'd like to know who's in our virtual space. As you share in the chat feature, I want to quickly introduce our presenters today. Today, you will hear from Allison Heishman. Allison is the Partner Solutions Associate at SMU DataArts. She provides support and services to public funding agencies, private foundations, and national service organizations by helping them derive their maximum value. You'll also hear from Rebecca Roscoe. Rebecca is our Senior Research Associate at SMU DataArts. She works on compiling and analyzing data on arts organizations and their communities nationwide. She develops reports on essential issues in the arts management for arts leaders, funders, policymakers, research, and the general arts and cultural field. I am excited to go ahead and pass the baton to Rebecca to get us going, and I do hope that you continue to share your introductions in the chat. Rebecca, excited to learn from you.
Thanks, Monica. As Monica said, my name is Rebecca Roscoe. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a mixed race woman in my 30s. I have dark brown hair pulled up in a ponytail and a white blouse and a blurred background today. So I'm going to kick off today's webinar by diving into some findings from both past and pretty recent studies. Before I do that, let's just take a moment to talk about why this work is so crucial and how it can benefit your organizations and communities. This discussion around workplace diversity is not new. Many folks in the arts sector are now advocating not only for a diverse workforce, but a workforce that is inclusive and equitable. Doing this requires change at the institutional level and deep thinking across organizations, all across levels at an organization. Our goal is to help communities and organizations better understand the demographics of their workforces and the communities that they serve. And by gathering this demographic data, we can provide key information to inform decisions that ensure everyone has access to opportunities within the arts and culture sector. Having this information is also vital for all of us to remain relevant and representative of our ever-changing society as arts and cultural leaders. So gathering, analyzing, and sharing data are important and concrete steps to inform this process and change. Confident and accurate data collection is paramount, and this is where us at SMU DataArts can play a role. So as many of you know, I'm just going to do like a timeline of our workforce demographics initiative. SMU DataArts has decades of experience in data collection in the arts sector. In 2015, we piloted a demographic data collection effort of arts and cultural workforces. We knew that this type of data collection was a really sensitive undertaking. So we had a lot of internal and external conversations around how to keep the data private and also how to capture the nuances of an individual's identity. There's so many components in the way that we describe ourselves. The pilots that we conducted at the beginning of this initiative showed us that even those identity characteristics that could be used against an individual in some states and regions, thinking specifically, back in 2015, 2016, sexual orientation identities, and even now, they aren't protected. Some of them aren't protected in certain areas of the country, but it's still important to collect this information about individuals. So the instrument was developed to allow for nuance and specificity of an individual's identity, but then we aggregate responses on the back end so that comparisons can be made at the community level to things like the US Census data. LA County, the county's art and cultural department, was with us from the very start of this process. And I'm going to spend some time today describing a couple key findings that emerged from our most recent study that kind of look back at the numerous other studies that they have conducted with us. So moving forward in the timeline, as we learned more about the needs of the sector and our ability to deliver on those needs, we conducted studies on the efficacy of collecting audience demographic data. And they might share a link in the chat, but the summary of that is it's very hard. We do have a report on the methodologies that we explored for that. And we also explored what kind of deliverable or reporting mechanism could be given back at the individual organization level, while also protecting the anonymity of respondents. You might be familiar with the Workforce Demographics online platform that was implemented around this time, and Allison will go into greater detail on that feature later on. We ultimately built this platform to allow organizations to take control over who they were surveying and to have ownership over their progress, over how close they were to receiving a statistically significant number of responses in order to get those custom reports. And then finally, jumping to the present, I just want to iterate that the survey is a living document. We're often revisiting the questions, revisiting the options and the ways, and just responding to the different ways that we identify ourselves and how that evolves over time. A recent evolution in the survey was the inclusion of disability options such as mental health and chronic illness. These are invisible disabilities, but still important to capture. Additionally, other research that we conducted found that elements of well-being and psychological safety are interrelated to job performance. So we decided that it was important to capture these more fuzzy notions of what it's like to work at an organization within the demographics survey itself. And the most recent LA study, which I'll get into next, piloted additional questions related to the element of inclusion in one's workplace. We're actually doing deeper research on this topic as part of a grant with the National Endowment of the Arts, and you'll see these new questions included in this year's open study as well. Finally, we recognize that waiting for a funder or other umbrella institution to fund a study might mean that individual organizations who need this data might not have an easy way of utilizing a third party to collect this data anonymously and collect accurate data. So then we're here today. We launched the annual Open Workforce Demographics Study a few years ago, and that allows organizations to participate on a sliding scale. And this is a service we offer to the field, although later on I will share some research that we have conducted using this data at the national aggregate level. So the US workforce is undergoing such tremendous change and turnover at this point in time, and that's really felt hard in the arts and culture sector. The demographic study for LA County allowed us to see those shifts in the workforce from pre-pandemic periods of time in 2019 to 2023 when the study was conducted. We have conducted the study with LA County 3 times since 2016. And we just want to raise the fact that arts organizations are struggling to attract and inspire a diverse workforce, and they're having challenges aligning their missions and values to those of a younger workforce. This is a really important thing to address. It places the sector at a hiring disadvantage compared to other sectors. So in partnership with LA Department of Arts and Culture, when we first began this initiative, we were focusing with them on cultural equity and inclusion. We wanted to track and measure demographics of the LA arts workforce with a priority to advance this idea that everyone in LA County should have equitable access to arts and culture. For the 2023 study, we had 4 key questions. The first being, what was the shift in workforce diversity? The second was about equitability in terms of access to power. The third was about that climate of inclusion that I mentioned earlier. It came out of the NEA research, and it's really diving into the extent of how someone perceives working at their organization. How does that vary based on demographic characteristics of people, as well as characteristics of the organizations in which they work? And finally, we wanted to explore how workforce demographics and roles within an organization might relate to individual attitudes and intentions. So we added 3 questions to the study that asks about job satisfaction, willingness to recommend your workplace, and perhaps your intention to leave your job. And those were also included in this open study as well. So this slide tackles that first question. You see a comparison of 2019 data on the left to the most recent data collected on the right. If you click one more time, you'll see brackets appear that are the summation of all of the Black, Indigenous, and people of color responses. So you can see 41% BIPOC in 2019 to 49% BIPOC in 2023. So this was a pretty significant shift, and the distribution of this shift occurred across all different groups. So it wasn't one particular racial or ethnic group that grew. We did see a slightly bigger increase among Asian respondents, but that wasn't significant in the data. However, if we go to the next slide, the context that we're looking at is in the context of the community in which these organizations are working in. So there is still a lot of room for improvement when it comes to reflecting the diversity of LA County among the arts and culture workforce. Specifically, you can see 13% Hispanic or Latinx in the LA arts workforce in 2023, but that's compared to 49% of the LA County population identifying as Hispanic or Latinx. So that's a big gap there. And this trend between BIPOC and white respondents, between the arts workforce and the larger community, that's repeated in all the studies we conduct. So this indicates that progress is being made, but there's still work to do in making jobs in the arts accessible to a wider population. So that was just a really quick and dirty snippet of the findings. You can read the full report on our or LA County's website. And I just want to leave us with some of the key opportunities that this research presented. For instance, there is a need for more development opportunities for Latinx staff. They're underrepresented in arts and cultural organizations. I didn't go over this thoroughly, but in the report, we also found disparities in leadership roles for LGBTQ staff, and it also explored how effectively organizations might create an inclusive climate. And thinking about that inclusive climate, board members generally perceived inclusion more positively than staff, and perceptions of inclusion tend to diminish as organization size increases. So we're seeing a difference in how staff and board members are perceiving working at an organization, and we're also seeing how smaller organizations are more effective at retaining staff and maintaining a healthy workplace culture. And lastly, the research showed dissatisfaction among supervisory staff. And this aligns with broader trends of burnout. There was a report that just came out through Museums Moving Forward among art museum workers, and it also finds that burnout is highest among those middle management roles. And we know that these middle management staff members and supervisory staff in general, they have a lot of institutional knowledge, they have a lot of tenure. So when we lose these individuals, it means that we're losing critical capacity and expertise. So let's just keep going and let's shift gears now to the workforce demographic study. Participating in the study can help organizations better understand the diverse makeup of their workforce to remain relevant to and representative of our changing society. And like I said before, we usually use this data at the individual organization level, but we have leveraged aggregate results in wider research initiatives. And this year will be the third year of data collection. In 2021, we had about 2,000 responses among 46 organizations. And last year, we increased that to over 3,000 responses from 58 organizations. And here you can see how participating organizations broke out in the past two studies. And you can see we have a variety of differently sized organizations who participated. Some had budgets under $10,000, others had budgets over $10 million. So a huge variety, but I will say that over a third of the organizations in both studies were below $1 million in budget size. There's also a wide variety of artistic, and also you'll see here some non-artistic disciplines. In 2021, we had more arts education organizations, more multidisciplinary organizations, and more visual or media-focused organizations. And then last year, we welcomed a greater number of dance, music, museum, and theater, arts and cultural organizations. So we're dealing with a really varied response pool. It means that aggregating responses doesn't really give us insights into one particular sector or type of organization, but we can look at it from a bird's eye view from a national level and use it to complement other research projects. An example of this is a grant-making program evaluation project that we undertook with the Ford Foundation. We were looking to evaluate their grant-making strategies for their creativity and free expression arts and culture program. And the report in general, it identified gaps among the grantees where Ford could improve practices in order to drive long-lasting social change. And we actually used data from the 2021 Open Study to look at workforce demographics and kind of see what those recommendations might be in encouraging equity in the workplace. So in the 2021 Open Study, we found 15% of individuals self-identified as a person with a disability, and that's very similar to the percent of individuals working in the United States that have a disability. So a good even representation there among the disabled population. However, when we look at disability by role, which is what this chart is showing you, I want you to focus on the red bar, the first bar. You can see that 12% of people with a disability are board members versus 21% of those not identifying as having a disability. So there's underrepresentation among disabled workforce members when it comes to board member seats. We also found in the Open Study that those reporting a disability gave lower ratings on those inclusion questions related to well-being, psychological safety, support for risk-taking, and overall happiness at the workplace. We also found an underrepresentation of people of color, similar to the LA study and other studies. And when we break things down by role, now I want you to focus on the magenta, the pink bars at the end, where you can see that 26% of BIPOC respondents are independent contractors versus 18% of white respondents. So we're seeing that people of color are more likely to be hired in non-permanent staff positions. So overall, the 2021 open study tells us that there's inequitable access to power and decision-making at the board level for those who face multiple and intersecting forms of structural discrimination. We see inequitable access for people with a disability. We see inequitable access for people of color and on the level of board and independent contractors here. So these findings allowed us to give the Ford Foundation some recommendations around equity and leadership, as well as how they might improve workplace climates for people with a disability. And that was a lot, but I just wanted to give you a taste of the kinds of research that we conduct at the community level using this data. So, and for now, I'll just hand it back over to Monica, who's going to introduce our panelists to share their own unique perspectives.
Thank you so much, Becca. That was a really thorough look into our workforce demographic work and research and insights. And if you can see in the chat, there are a lot of folks sharing comments and looking forward to digging deep into some of the research that we were able to provide. With that, I'm excited to bring in a couple of fresh voices who can share their perspective of how they are able to use those regional insights and organizational insights, showing a little bit more to have a more inclusive workspace. So I'm excited to bring three voices to our webinar space. First, I would like to introduce and welcome Tenneille Choi, who is the Development Officer at Free Arts for Abused Children in Arizona. Tenneille is a proud Phoenician who loves living in Arizona. She is also a fundraiser, speaker, and arts advocate who sees the arts as a means for mental health support, quality education, community development, and social change. We also have Preston Mills. Preston is the Data Program Manager at Community Partners in Los Angeles. And as a part of the Communities Partners program, he uses GIS, geospatial information systems, and program data to strengthen the impact of their intermediary efforts. Preston has built his career at the intersection of data and community engagement. And I'll also welcome Genevieve Fowler, excuse me. Genevieve is the program manager at Community Partners in Los Angeles and the intermediary department. Genevieve has spent her career working at the intersection of arts, culture, community, and social justice. With that, I'm going to go ahead and stop my share to bring in those folks so we can focus in on those speaking voices. Very nice. It's good to see you, Genevieve, and it's also good to see you as well, Tenneille. If I could, I would like to start with Preston, and it's good to see you there. Awesome. To start with you two at Community Partners, Preston and Genevieve, you come to this conversation with a very unique perspective as you've taken the regional look at workforce demographics through the LA County report to think about some of your work and some of your priorities at your organization. Can you tell me a little bit about how your organization is using that data for advocacy and equity? Excuse me, what does that data mean for Los Angeles County?
Definitely. Thank you so much, Monica, for having us. We're so excited to be here and just to speak to the fact that the survey and the findings actually really helped us better understand the landscape that we as an intermediary for arts and culture work are playing in the landscape of culture bearers and artists as we're looking to advance equity, specifically here at Community Partners. So what that typically means is that we're looking at the information related to that disparity that we particularly noted in the survey that specifically spoke to the ways in which Hispanic and Latinx individuals had this widest gap of representation within this field of arts and culture. You all spoke to it. And just to give a bit of numbers to that is that in Los Angeles County, we have roughly 49% Latinx individuals and families. And so to give that in comparison to the 11.5% that was indicated for our arts and culture workforce really speaks to a huge disparity that we're looking to address here at community partners. What it typically means is that we have to think about grant making in that specific format. And so oftentimes you'll see that some of the larger institutions here in Los Angeles are often represented in some of these funding streams, whether it be from the American Rescue Plan funds or some of these other avenues. And we're really looking to find ways to address that as an equity-oriented organization, which typically means that we're looking at community-based insights from folks on the ground who've been in intergenerational work for decades to give us the advice as to how can we uplift artists and culture bearers that can really speak to advancing and addressing this particular type of gap. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Oh, that's so thorough. Genevieve, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? That was really expensive.
Yeah, Preston is amazing, and thanks so much for deep diving in. That's one of the reasons we love to work with him. But yeah, just to follow up, it's like as an organization that is committed to racial equity and equity-centered practices, reports like these are so helpful, as Preston said, in placing us in the landscape of giving us the information and the really specific information about who has the most need. So that we can then design our programs, our practices, our guidelines, our grant making tactics to directly address and support those communities that are identified in this, and continue building upon that data ourselves as well to kind of fill in the gaps as we disaggregate the data in our own work as well.
That's awesome. Being able to take those insights and then plugging them into actual work and resources for your community. I think that's the heart of what we hope this data can do for folks in their communities. Tenneille, I would love to bring you into this conversation because you take the individual organizational report and you learn a lot about your workforce. Can you tell me a little bit about how your organization wanted to come into this process? What was the need that you guys are hoping to fill?
Yeah, so around 2020, we hired a DEI consultant to really do an assessment of free arts. We were really interested in integrating DEI into our 10-year strategic plan, and they gave us a great report of what they found and observed, and also a bunch of recommendations on how to proceed forward in order to make our organization more diverse, more inclusive, more equitable. From those suggestions, our staff picked the top ones that they were most interested in pursuing, and then formed an equity integration team to really move that work. So we saw this workforce study as a really great tool that can help us really measure where we're at currently, and then progressively as we do this work, see if it makes a difference. I know that one of our pro-equity strategies was diversifying the voices in places of concentrated power. And so first we had to assess, where are those places of power? What does diversity mean for an organization that is maybe skewing older, skewing more female, and figuring out the gaps there. So that's just one example of the kinds of goals that we were hoping to pursue with this tool.
Definitely. Were there any discoveries that you had as an organization once you were able to participate and receive that report?
Yeah, I think one surprise that really stood out was how many people identified as having a disability. We didn't realize it was a significant portion of our staff. And of course, you can't always tell someone has a disability just by looking at them. So this really prompted our operations team to think more about their onboarding process and the kinds of resources that they highlight for people who might have a disability. They didn't realize that there was an opportunity there to really support those employees.
I love that. Just you're doing this work, you're putting your staff into place, and then there's still so many discoveries to find when you're looking at your workforce. I want to just kind of end our quick discussion. Preston and Genevieve, you've been able to take a large view look at workforce demographic information. Can you share some of the goals or paths forward that you have for looking at this data and some of the things that you hope to accomplish?
Totally. I think one of the things that we really recognize is that this is the basis for our advocacy work, the basis for our grant making, and it's the basis for highlighting the ways in which community partners can share and showcase the work of our artists and culture bearers in a responsible manner. So when we talk about that gap that we're noticing, we're not just talking about just, you know, any types of artists or culture bearers. We want to give a name to who these folks are, a face to who these folks are, the responsibility that these artists and culture bearers hold in that particular space. We have artists and culture bearers who are looking to address anti-Blackness within the Latinx community, particularly as it comes from this origin of folks from Veracruz. We're talking about so many different folks who have histories in these communities and are looking to address them in that way. And so this work is really not only elevating the ways in which we are looking to address the gaps, but it's uncovering the ways in which it actually unfolds here in Los Angeles. And so we're consistently trying to figure out ways to be responsive and accountable to everyone here in LA County to make sure that culture and art is actually a human right here in LA.
I love that. Genevieve, did Preston drop the mic? I love that. And Tenneille, are there any goals and new projects or strategies that you've been able to think about as an organization?
I think one goal is the one pro-equity strategy I mentioned about concentrated power. I think that our organization has changed a lot since COVID, and so we have been trying to figure out what does it mean for every single staff person to feel like a leader in the organization, especially given all of the restructuring that we've gone through. We have a whole new leadership team with a new vision for the organization, and they're also getting their sea legs as well as they figure out how do we want to lead this organization. So I think the satisfaction questions of this survey has been really helpful in trying to assess, do people feel like they are making a difference, that they have a voice? Do they feel like they have access to the power that is available here at Free Arts and in the direction that it goes in? So I know that that's one big goal, especially just given all these changes. We want to make sure that no one's left behind or feeling kind of left out as we're making these changes and moving forward in a really, really big different ways.
I just have to say thank you to to all three of you for your hard work. You're making these huge changes, and I think that leads to a more equitable art society, which is what we all want, and for folks to feel valued and have the ability to move forward in their careers and feel comfortable. I just want to say thank you for sharing your perspectives with this audience, coming from your unique lenses and locations. Thank you so much for being a part of this presentation and providing that context. SMU DataArts can provide the data, but it's always great to hear how you're able to apply those insights to do great things within your communities. With that, I am going to go ahead and shift things back to our presentation. I'm going to bring in Allison Heishman, who's going to talk a little bit about the open study workforce demographic. Give me 1 second, Allison, to bring that screen back.
No problem. Thank you so much, Monica. And I just want to say thank you, Monica, and thank you to our incredible guests who, spoke so eloquently on the work that they have been doing, as a result of, taking part in different demographic studies that we've been able to offer with our partners over the years. I'll reintroduce myself. I'm Allison Heishman. I'm the Partner Solutions Associate at DataArts, at SMU DataArts. My pronouns are she, her. And just a brief physical description. I'm a white woman in my 40s. I have blonde hair pulled back, blue eyes. I'm wearing a white floral dress, and I do have a blurred background right now. And earlier in our presentation, Rebecca talked about the impact that our community demographic studies can have on the sector. And right now I want to talk a little bit about what we're able to offer with this opportunity with our fall workforce demographics study. We're hopefully this will allow folks to, individual organizations to collect the demographic information and be able to make an impact in your organizations and your work. If you do register for our upcoming study, I'll be working with you to ensure your success in the survey process. Participating in this study can help your organization better understand the diverse makeup of your staff and board and volunteers. And again, as Becca mentioned earlier, it helps to remain relevant to and representative of our changing society. The data that you can collect from your workforce can illuminate strengths, challenges, and opportunities for your organization as you, again, just by showing up, continue to embrace change and meet the needs of an evolving population with unique identities. Now we could jump over. We do want to hear a bit from you. So certainly lots of really incredible information has been shared. And as you continue to think about doing this work at your organizations, we're curious which metrics are most important to you for assessing diversity, equity, access, and well-being in your arts organizations. We do continue to grow and shift our survey questions based on the way the world has changed around us. So we're always curious what is most interesting to the folks that are hopefully going to be participating in these surveys. And you can feel free to share your answers to that in our chat as well. So a little bit about our survey. The survey includes questions that allow you and your workforce to anonymously self-identify around race and ethnicity, age, gender, sexual orientation, and disability status. The survey itself is a link that you'll send to your workforce for them to self-report their anonymous answers. And we have an easy-to-use platform that provides you with links to the survey, the ability to track your organization's responses, and the aggregated progress of the survey that you're taking with your organization. We also provide email templates and a recommended timeline to engage your staff, board, volunteers, and independent contractors. And we also will be sharing in our follow-up, we have a video that gives a more detailed look at that platform and the survey questions itself that we will share with that to folks that are more curious in the logistics of the full process. And also wanted to share that if anyone at your organization has any concerns about the security of these questions and the data that's collected, please reassure them that we take our confidentiality very seriously. The demographic information that is collected is only shared out in aggregate, and we do not collect any names or emails in the survey process. If your organization reaches a high enough participation threshold to ensure anonymity and a high confidence level in the results, you'll receive a demographic report on your organization once the study is complete. Organizations who receive these reports often use them to inform their diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. Shortly after the survey closes, you'll get a notification from us, and you'll be able to download that report right from our platform. We'll be sharing a link in the chat where you can view an example of these reports on our website. Just a bit of an overview on the important dates for our upcoming study. Our 2024 Workforce Demographics Study will launch on August 12th, and the survey remains live for 6 weeks, closing on September 20th. 1 week before the study launches, you would receive access to our platform and your personal dashboard, which you'll use to distribute the survey to your workforce. Once the study launches, we again have a recommended timeline of sending 2 to 3 reminder emails out to encourage engagement. And we provide you with those email templates to use in that outreach, as well as other resources to set you up for success. And just a final reminder that our deadline for registration to participate in this study is coming up. It's July 26th, and we'll share out that registration link in the chat as well. We do hope that you'll join our fall study. We're committed to making this an accessible and affordable service for organizations of all sizes. Many of our studies and the community reports that you heard our colleagues talking about earlier today were from partners who worked with us to survey their membership or their grantees, and that's limited to folks that are connected with those organizations. And we find that this is a really exciting way to make this tool and make these resources available to any organization that has interest. Our sliding scale for this study starts at just $25. And I would also just like to say now we welcome any questions you may have. And if you would like to email us at any time with additional questions, please feel free to do so.
Thanks so much, Allison. I do see that we're getting a couple of questions about the threshold that's required to receive one of those reports. Could you talk a little bit about where folks can find that information?
Absolutely. So there is more detailed information on the website link. With our organization level reports, we do require at least a workforce minimum of 10 participants, but that does include all board members, staff members, volunteers, any independent contractors or artists that you would want to include in that survey. So we do, again, to preserve that anonymity, we do ask that the workforce is 10 members or above. And the threshold varies a bit. We can share out some of our tools that we use to define what that number would be for your organization. When you do enter those numbers into our platform, it'll immediately calculate that number, so you'll have that goal. You'll know exactly the number of participants you need to engage in order to hit that report level. With larger organizations, if you are an organization that would be sending this survey out to, I think, 275 members or above, which again, board members, independent contractors, and volunteers, it can be pretty easy to reach that number. Those are based on percentages. So our minimum percentage of participants for a larger organization is 20%.
Thank you, Allison. That you explained that better than I ever could. We do have a really good question that I want to keep you with. Michael McCurdy asked, what is the best way to share out those findings and the elements of results with the individuals within your institutions? Have you heard of how other folks are doing it within the field?
Yeah, I mean, I think I could probably best speak to the way that we use our demographic results here at SMU DataArts. So we've participated in our own internal surveys over a number of years, and we share that out in a few different ways. It's part of a discussion for our diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility working group, which is a committee of our staff members. So we look at those results and look at the ways that maybe we have made some progress in some areas over the years, or possibly have some more work to do. We also present those findings in our staff meeting, and I believe they also are part of our board presentations at our one of our annual board meetings. That information gets shared out, which also helps to encourage our board members to participate in the survey when it comes around again. But it can be really fantastic to check in internally, and I think Tenneille mentioned this specifically when they were talking earlier, but the well-being questions, so those questions that come in that really talk about, how, safe do you feel, how heard do you feel, how seen do you feel at your organization, can have a really profound impact, as well as, some of the invisible, demographics that you're not going to get without the self-reported survey. So these things that we don't know, I think can really be illuminated by taking these surveys.
That's so great. I think that's answering some of the questions that are coming through in our chat space. I want to say thank you for answering those questions. And I also want to just shout out to Tenneille for providing that insight as well, how they were able to use some of that data and share it with their audience. I want to quickly share, as folks continue to ask questions, I hope that you do. I want to share some ways that you can stay connected. Oh, but I do have one more question before we move forward.
I think I saw that. Do the survey questions vary between staff, board, and volunteers?
Michael, that's a great question.
Yeah. They do very slightly, and we will share. There is a PDF on our website that you can download that has the survey questions complete. I believe, and I may need to tag in Becca here if we need more detail. But there are a few questions that staff would see that I think board members do not see, and that might specifically be some of those wellness questions, since those aren't as relevant to someone who is a board member at an organization versus someone who's there day to day doing the daily work as a staff member. Becca, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I can add a little bit of specificity. So in the survey, we ask about whether or not your position is a supervisory position. So we only ask that to staff members. We also have a question in there about executive, whether you're on an executive leadership team. So that's also only staff. And then we actually decided after the NEA research that, and talking to LA County, the experience of independent contract labor is important too. So we're actually allowing all roles, board, independent contractor, staff, to see those perception questions and to answer. They are optional. So if an independent contractor only worked for, less than a month or something, and they just don't see the relevance in that, they're welcome to continue on and not answer those questions, but they are shown and available to everyone across the organization.
And Becca, does that include volunteers? I'm seeing there are folks that are concerned that they want to be able to capture that volunteer data as well.
Yeah, so in the survey, we consider volunteers the same, they would have the same experience as staff members, just because so many arts and culture organizations depend on volunteer labor, and a lot of those folks are operating in sort of staff positions.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you both. These are some really great questions. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Catherine, for sharing those questions in the chat. We see the conversation and brain power happening in that space. I'm just going to continue forward. If we do see a couple more questions, I'll bring my colleagues back in to answer those last few questions aloud. But I just wanted to share some additional ways that you can stay connected with our work at SMU DataArts. Just a quick little update if my computer would like to work with me. We encourage you to stay connected with these next couple of events that we have. We're revisiting our national trends and data from arts and cultural organizations. We encourage you to register for another webinar where you will hear from industry experts and a panel conversation. And that'll feature Rebecca Thomas from Rebecca Thomas and Associates, Jill Robinson from TRG Arts, and Ted Russell of Russell Consulting. And they're going to talk through some of the key findings in operating and financial health trends through art and cultural organizations. I think it's going to be a really powerful conversation, and I do hope that you're able to register and join us. We also love our art vibrancy work. We have recently released another way to look at that data. We've provided insights that explore top vibrant rural counties throughout the nation. There is a blog and our annual list. So if you would like to learn more about communities who are doing the work in rural spaces, we encourage you to take a look at that information to learn how folks are really getting the best out of their communities. With that, we always say stay connected with us. You are able to stay connected with us on our multiple social media platforms. You can sign up for our newsletter. That way you can stay informed of all of our updated information that's coming from SMU DataArts. I encourage you to stay connected on LinkedIn. A few people were able to register for today's session through that platform. We're excited to be able to connect with you in so many ways. And as we begin to close out our time, I want to really share a huge thank you to our amazing guest speakers. Your voice was amazing in this conversation. Tenneille, Preston, and Genevieve, thank you so much for providing that insight to this audience about how you're using data to make excellent change within your community and workforce. I also want to say thank you to my colleagues, Allison and Rebecca, for providing really great insights about the data and the reports. And I also want to say thank you to our background team. There were a lot of folks that were answering questions in the chat and dropping links. So I want to say thank you to Katie, AJ, and Rochelle for providing that support. And to each of you for joining us for today. We really do appreciate you wanting to learn more about the data in the insights. We hope that you're able to capture some of those links that we've dropped in our chat, but we will be sure to share a recording of today's presentation and our slide deck and our follow-up email so that you'll have all of the information that we've shared today. With that, I'm going to give our team just one more minute to look through any last-minute questions, but that will conclude our webinar today. Thank you so much for joining us. We really did appreciate engaging with you and talking with you about workforce demographic data and how we can continue to work for a more inclusive arts workforce.